Steve, how are you?
I'm wonderful. It's a
It's
podcast.
wonderful. You're working hard today, and I appreciate you spending some time with me. And a longer day for you, but I'm happy you're here. I'm happy everybody else is here. This is the Stuff Summer Says podcast with
Steve.
Steve. I don't know why my voice was a little high there. Um, anyways, back to normal voice. Steve, we have a great show. I spent some time chatting with one of my favorite people on the Penn State beat, and honestly, probably, but not necessarily somebody you think of when you think of the Penn State beat. But he's an essential part of it. I would say. That was Mr. Joe Hermitt. Joe joined the podcast this week to chat about kind of his career, our normal interview with many of the beat people that we've had on. But I think it's a great conversation. Stick around if you're listening right now on like a normal podcasting service. We did at the end of the interview go over some of his best photos, or at least my favorite photos with Joe, and he talked about those. So you might want to check out the YouTube page for that. We're pretty descriptive about what the photos are, and if you know Joe's work, you probably know the photos, but something to keep in mind, something to think about as you listen to us this week. So we'll be back after that, and then normal stuff, normal-ish stuff this week. Everyone, I'm very excited to have this guest on because for a multitude of reasons, not only is he a great person, but he's someone I consider to be my personal photographer, if you will, at Penn State football games. Mr. Joe Hermitt, how are you, Joe?
I am fabulous. How are you doing?
Good, good.
I'm actually your wife's personal photographer. You
Oh,
just
I'm
happen
so
to be
sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right. That's fair. That's
yeah,
true. That's accurate.
you just happen to be next to her all the time.
That's
But
true.
yeah,
That's correct. Yes. Yes.
close.
Joe, when we have people on this podcast, we want to talk more of their career and kind of how you got there. And I think you probably have one of the more unique Penn State beat people stories compared to many of the writers because that's a much more traditional, easier path to understand. What is your kind of story? How long have you been covering the team through your camera lens, and why did you want to become a sports photographer primarily?
Yeah, honestly, I've always been a huge sports fan. And I was one of those kids that read the morning newspaper every morning, seeing the box scores, checking out all the stories, all the stats, and I got Sports Illustrated, which back in the day was like the Bible for sports photography. From like the early 70s when I was a kid, like all the way up through the last few years, kind of when it kind of went under. So I was always really interested in sports and love sports photography. Got to the Patriot News in Harrisburg in 1997, and we kind of we had a pretty big staff at the time. We all covered games, so I ended up covering like maybe 3 games a year, one on the road, 2 at home. But then around 2000, just before the 2000 season, our management decided they wanted to up the coverage and create like a whole special section for the paper, and decided that they needed a little bit more consistency and a little more knowledge. And when so they really wanted a beat photographer, much like a beat writer. So I was very fortunate to be chosen to do that. And 2000 was my first season. Like I said, I had shot games previous to that. But 2000 was my first season, and I was greeted by 2000, 2001, and 2002, which were
You don't even get a bowl trip out of it.
didn't even get a bowl trip out of it. No winning records. My first game was at the Meadowlands against USC. And my signature photo of the day was the Penn State. I can't even remember the punter, but got a punt blocked early on, and USC scooped it up and took it in for a touchdown. And the rest was history, So finally, 2003, they actually put together a decent team, and with Larry Johnson, and but So yeah, it was so it was really a 2000. That was
Hmm.
kind of right on the cusp too of like film and digital cameras. Because previous to that, we actually had a dark room, a full-fledged dark room under the stands at Beaver Stadium, where we would go in and we had processing tanks, and we would halftime we'd run in and we would develop film, hang it to dry, run back out and shoot the second half, come back in, develop the second half of film. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was, you know, uh, considering, that I went from that to now I can shoot a photo on my mirrorless digital camera and sync it up to my iPhone and send the photo up into the Twitterverse or the Xverse or whatever you want to call it in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been pretty amazing. It's been a pretty amazing, uh, 25 years.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, I think maybe more so. Obviously, we talk about the internet over those 25 years, and really 2000 on, things changed so much and so quickly. Um, what's kind of been technology wise, I feel like photography has also exploded, and you talk about mirrorless cameras, and you talk about even the storage capabilities of we've gone from like 256 megabytes all the way up to, I don't even know what card you're shooting on now, but
128
what's that?
gigabyte, 128 gigabytes.
So,
Right.
but like,
Yeah.
I have to imagine your job in that sense, has it gotten easier or has it gotten harder?
Um, with every new thing comes a new responsibility and a new. So I mean, like back in the day, yeah, back in the 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, like I'd photograph the game, and I would dump my cards, and like I might upload. We didn't have PennLive at that
Hmm.
time. It's the Patriot News, and I might put like 10 to 15 photos into the system for a game. Now I'll have 15 photos on the website at halftime,
Yeah.
like counting pregame and halftime. Um, so, I mean, new responsibilities prop up. People want things, immediacy is the key. Getting things up quickly, getting things behind the scenes, things people don't see, I think is important. Because you see so much on TV that you know it's really people are interested in the things they can't see on TV.
Yeah.
So I mean, I go from putting like a dozen photos up, say, send into the paper in those early days. And then we really started hitting the internet hard. I think it was about 2000. It was around the Orange Bowl time,
Hmm.
2000, 2005. That's when we really started to, um, kind of engage and then it just took off. Like I'm going out and taking photos of tailgating, and then I'm taking photos of the team coming in and putting it up. Hey, putting a thing, hey, the team's here. Like people at home say, can see that kind of stuff. And then um, the way I met you was that, like, I kind of figured that after a while, I was shooting people in the stands, and there's so many color. I mean, there's so much going on in a college football game, other than the game. There's the pageantry, there's the bands, there's the fan.
Yeah.
There's so much happening, and I started taking photos of people in the stands, and I just like, well, I might as well try that, and just kind of called it Faces in the Crowd, and you know, it's like one of the more popular things we have.
I was gonna ask. I mean, that's
Yeah,
one of the things that I even know, even when I know I'm not going to be in it, I take a
yeah.
look at every week. Is that how do you connect with your audience, even if you know, any of Johnny or Audrey or Ben or anybody that writes and covers Penn State football, they can have the words, but you have visuals. How do you connect with the audience?
Well, I think that it's, I taking the photos during the game, I mean, it's really a matter of just looking around, and seeing and just trying to capture the. I always tried to approach the game as covering a story rather than just taking photos of the game. So trying to cover the entire story, whether it be weather involved or fans, the stages of joy and grief and and despair and then ultimate joy if they win, like that kind of stuff. Um and then I really tried to get through social media to connect is important. Like I think I met you initially because of Nittanyville. I always try and connect with the Nittanyville guys, and girls and women and try to. So, I think the ardent Penn State fan knows about PennLive, but your casual fan who isn't from Harrisburg area might not. So I try to tap into you when you were there, right? Hey, word, man, I'm getting pictures of students all the time, putting them on and faces in the crowd, and then I tweet it out and I'll tag as many people as I can in it. And it tends to just spread, and but it's like restocking a roster, right? Because kids leave all the time. We're always trying to restock, like replenish the fan base and getting people to, getting the young fans to, getting their eyes to our website, and seeing the coverage that we do and that I do, like, I do try to do stuff that nobody else does because, you could get game photos everywhere. But, trying to get shots of the fans, trying to get shots of the band and like I said, the stuff that goes on off the field.
I want to ask there, one of the things I think you mentioned things that nobody else does. And I think one of the things that if you don't necessarily know Joe's photos, you will when I say this, but you've done the portraits at Media Day, the kind of the retro vibe feel. How did that idea come about? And what is the reception like been from the Penn State players when you see those posted, et cetera? They see those posted.
Yeah, that kind of happened. I was doing Patriot News. We did a magazine for 3 years from, I think it was 2010 to 2012. And it was called Pride Magazine. And it was great. It was really good. And Bob Flounders and I and David Jones we'd do a bunch of feature stories where we, like in the off season, would either go to Penn State or go to players' hometowns when they were off and do these in-depth stories. And I would try to take these really cool portraits of them. And it was so much fun. And it was just a way to present these guys in a different light than people are used to seeing them. And unfortunately, print kind of revenue in that area kind of went down and we discontinued it. But I still wanted to do something cool and different. And I just remember when I was a kid, like back in the 70s and even before, in the 60s, before my time even really, I remember these photos, these like football cards and stuff, with just these ridiculous poses. And I did a little research into it and I found out that it originated from this guy down in Oklahoma. And he called it the old Huckenbuck style. And he used to, it was a thing, because back in those days in the 50s, they had one picture, like pop, and that was it. So he would like, these exaggerated poses, and to get them in the air, shoot them from low down to make them look big. But I just remember as a kid loving them, and then I started talking to some people around, my era, and they were like, yeah, I remember those were great, those were really cool. I just kind of came up with the idea, and I did a little research, and I found a bunch of Penn State Huckenbuck style photos of guys like Jack Ham and Frank Harris and those guys, and I dug those out. And then at the photo day one year, it was the year God, I think it was 2015. I was like, I'm gonna give it a shot, you know. So I had to print them out because the players like Saquon and McSorley and like all those guys, they had no idea what these Huck and Buck things were. So I had all these printouts, and I'd be like, this is what I want you to do. It's gonna be fun, different, you know, kind of funny, have fun. And at first, like some of them were kind of like, huh? And then I would do it, and they'd all be gathered around, and like I would get the guy to actually do one, and they'd all start laughing. I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Then I'd show them the picture on my camera, and they'd get all into it. Yeah, man, that's awesome, you know. And I had they were great, like Saquon. You know, I tried the pose I was getting him to do was not the Heisman, but it was kind of like the Heisman. And they were like, "Hey, Heisman." And he's like, "No, I'm not doing the Heisman. I'm not doing that." No, man, don't worry. No, I'm not doing the Heisman. You know, and that was funny too because I remember. At one point, I had to turn him. I only got like about 2 minutes with each guy.
Yeah.
And he was not in the right position. I was trying to get him to turn, and he wasn't quite getting what I was trying to say. So I just go up and I grab him around like the midsection to turn him, you know? And like when I did, I grabbed him I'm like, this is like grabbing a chimney. And I was like, oh, I was like, damn, man. And I got it turned out to be, it was awesome. You know, it was great. He's like up on one toe and he's got the ball up high and it's just, you know, but even the linemen and the kickers and yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And I've kind of done them every year, but they're not quite as exaggerated as they used to be. Some of them are, you know, it's kind of, you know, but it's it's a lot of fun. And like I said, I think I really like to show these guys when I can in a different light, you know, because everybody just sees them as these, you know, huge football stars. But in reality, they're like 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, you know, and they're like that fun, you know, and they, you know, and so I think, you know, we've been able to come up with some pretty fun images over the years.
No, they're always a favorite gallery of mine to look at every year. So I want to ask you, what does a typical game day look like in terms of both, maybe not necessarily like when you're getting there, but what equipment are you bringing? You know, what is essential to what's in the bag every time you head off to Beaver Stadium, and why do you are you a Nikon guy or are you a Canon guy? Like, why are you partial to those lenses, this lens or that?
Yeah, I'm a Canon guy because that's what the Patriot News and PennLive buys me. and it's fantastic, you know, but you know what, Nikon's great too. It's like I'm not one of those guys that's like Nikon or Canon, you know. It's like because in the end, like they're tools, you know. I mean, they're not, you know, they're just a, you know, a way to capture, a way to do your job, you know. And it's I shoot with you know, I shoot my, you know, my main, well, not even I have 3 lenses. I carry 3 camera bodies around with me, which a lot of people think I'm crazy because most people carry 2, and I probably have arthritis in my neck because I carry 3 all the time. But I carry, you know, the big lens, the monster one, you know, it's a 400 millimeter and it's a 2.8 aperture lens. You know, I don't want to get too in the weeds with it, but that, you know, that's your big down the field lens, and the aperture. The reason it's so big is because the aperture, and so, you know, the aperture, so you can shoot like in night games, you can shoot at high speeds and such, you know, and it's and my second lens is a 70 to 200 millimeter, which is also a 2.8 millimeter, and that's like once the team gets within like the 20-yard line, that's the lens that you're really going to want to use, because the 400 millimeter would just be way too tight, you know. You know, and then I have on the other one a wide angle lens, and I don't, you know, there'll be several games where I don't even use that during the game, but you know, that one rare occasion where, you know, something happens right in front of you, you know, and it's just like a really dramatic look because you got the whole stadium behind you and everything. And yeah, so that's what I drag around with me all the time.
And how many and how many memory cards? How
Yeah,
you go through a bunch of them for a game, or is it just pretty much one?
I probably go through like I got like 2 memory cards in each camera, so I can and like I'll swap, like I'll run in when if I'm down, like our photo room is down like where the visiting team comes out right off that tunnel. So if I'm down that into the field and there's a timeout, or the first quarter ends or something, I have time. I'll run off and dump the card onto my camera, onto my computer and stuff. But I would say that on an average game, I probably will have about maybe about 25 to 30. Well, no, maybe 40 gigs worth of photos.
Wow.
But you got to understand, like, you're shooting at like 12, 15 frames a second,
and they're all in raw too, I would assume.
Right? Yeah, they're all raw. And but you lop off like 2/3 of them right away, because like there'll be inconsequential plays that might be out of focus. They might have the referee in the way. I mean, it's just you got to shoot every play, because you never know what's going to happen.
I'm curious. Football players have their positioning, but all the photographers all have their positioning. What is your strategy to where you stand, where you sit, where you are running down this sideline versus the other sideline, when and where?
Yeah, I learned very early on that I am being paid to cover Penn State, and that's what our readers and our fans care about. So I always have Penn State coming toward me. Okay. So offensively and defensively, so that's the first thing. Always have Penn State coming toward me. So if they, they're going for a touchdown, they're coming right at me. Or if they sack the quarterback and he fumbles, it's coming interception, coming right at me. I usually shoot from the end zones most of the time. Just again, because they're coming right at you, but also like in photographic terms, it makes for like a cleaner background. Because if you're on the side, sometimes it gets really busy with the benches right behind. It looks kind of ugly in the background. So I tend to shoot from the end zones a lot. But as far as, I mean, that's the basic principle of it. But then you got to pick a side when you're in the back of the end zone, and you develop that over watching the team, and you just kind of gut instincts, I mean, some teams tend to go right a lot. Some teams tend to go left. I mean, it's kind of, and they're different, every year's a little different. Every year's a little different. And you could be dead on right that the play is going to go right, and then something happens and it's a busted play and he throws back across the grain and the guy goes in the touchdown on the left side, and you're kind of stuck. But I mean, so I mean, a lot of it's luck of the draw. But a lot of it is also, knowing the game, trying to study the game, trying to figure out what they might call or what they might do, who they like to run behind, what part of the line do they like to run behind a lot, especially, third and short, where do they like to go, third and I mean, it's kind of a feel, really.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. You talk about Penn State always coming at you, and there was one particular incident 2 seasons ago, I think it was now, where a Penn State player came a little too close to you.
That was last year.
Was that last year? Okay, yes, that was last year. Now I remember that.
Last year.
Has that scar fully healed?
He who shall not be named, Dante Cephas. Yeah, that was at Northwestern with about like 6 minutes to go in the game, and they had the ball about midfield, and I'm in the back of the end zone, and Drew Aller drops back. And you know what's funny is kind of like I brought it on myself, because I was just kind of bitching and moaning a lot that season about they never throw deep. They never throw deep. can they please throw deep? Because those are the best pictures,
Yeah.
like long pass and,
Yeah.
the ball in the air and all that. And I was like, come on. And that was like in October, right? Early October.
Yeah, that was an early game. That was was not.
I mean, it was like probably 5 games into the season. So, and they never throw deep. They never throw deep, right? Aller drops back. I'm in the back of the end zone with my long lens looking. He drops back. He's looking. And all of a sudden he's uncorking it and it's coming toward me. And I'm like, ooh, he's throwing deep, And I always have that 70 to 200 millimeter lens and to pick up because when they get really close to me.
Yeah.
And I'm kneeling down and that big 400 millimeter lens is on what's called a monopod.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows what a tripod is. Well, this is just a single legged one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made of metal, and I kind of shift it into my, cradle it in my other arm. And I pick up my 70 to 200 millimeter lens to try and get the photo of the touchdown that he dropped. Not that I'm bitter or anything, but he misses the ball and he slides right into me. And I didn't even see him coming because I had my lens up, my camera up, and he just, he hit me pretty good. Head over heels, I went back, but fortunately it was grass there. And I was okay. I was just like stunned. I was just like, man, what,
Yeah.
And I got up and, and I'm like, whew, man, it's kind of like, everybody's like, all right. I'm like, hey, I'm all right. Went back down. I started shooting again. I shot another play and I think it was 3rd down then. And I think they kicked a field goal after that or something. I can't remember the exact circumstances, but there was a timeout in the action and this kid comes over to me, a student, college guy, and he's like, "You all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." Because I had my wits about me. I was, wasn't concussed or anything,
Right.
Like,
no, yeah.
He's like, "You're bleeding," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, your leg, you're bleeding." And I looked down and it's like right near my ankle. I had shorts on because it was pretty hot. And I just like blood all over my leg. And I'm like, what the heck? Here, he had hit my monopod first, like with his body.
Uh-huh.
The monopod snapped in half. And then when it did, it like went into my leg. So I had this like circular cut in the base of my leg, like down near my foot. And it was just like bleeding. So I was like, oh man. So I went over to the bench area, the Penn State bench area, and I knew somebody over there, and I was like, hey, can you just tape this up? It was like 5 minutes left in the game. I was like, can you just tape this up for me? And so I could finish the game, and they're like, yeah. So I taped it up, but then it started getting kind of swollen and sore, and I finished the game, and it was like bleeding. It was bleeding pretty badly. So I went to the EMTs, and they unwrapped it and looked at it, tried to clean it up, and they're like, yeah, you need to go to the ER, you need to get this looked at, stitched up, and I'm like, all right. So fortunately, Northwestern Hospital is just down the road, and that's where we parked for the game. So I'm like, all right, packed my stuff up. I took an Uber down. It was like a mile away. And I sat in the ER, and I had all my gear and my computer, and you go to an ER, you're sitting there for a while. So
you edited the photos from the ER?
They had really good Wi-Fi. And yeah, I put my whole gallery up. I did all my photos and I put my gallery up and got everything in and like finished up right about the time they came in and got me and came out and got me. So I went back and stitched it up and
is that your only major injury from this gig?
Yes. Yeah.
That's wild.
Knock on wood. Yeah. It actually turned out, I mean, it's a long story, but make a long story longer. I was like going through like, it was kind of swelling. They're like, send me for physical therapy for like 4 or 5 more weeks. And I'm like, man, this isn't getting any better. It's like really swelling up. So finally, at the end of the season, they're like, let's do an MRI. And they do an MRI and they come back like the week before Christmas. And they're like, yeah, you got a torn tendon. We're going to need to go in there and repair it. I'm like, what?
all from the monopod.
Yeah, it went into it really like just went right into my leg and it severed the
tendon. Wild. So I have to ask, did you keep the monopod? Or do you at least have the photos framed?
Yeah. Oh man, I got photos because other photographers got photos of me getting like barrel whipped over. I'll send them to you. You know what? I'll send you the photo. You could use it as a thumbnail. For
Oh my God. That's great. That's great. Wow. Well, I'm glad that I know you have, maybe we need to get you more. I know you have your volleyball knee pads or your workman's knee pads or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to get you some like hockey knee pads for next season.
I think I need like catcher's gear.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I have one more thing I want to do before we get you out of here. I want to just I can't not let you go. I want to ask you why you picked these photos, why you kept these photos, what makes them great, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on.
All right.
Can you see my screen?
Oh yeah.
So this is the Allen Robinson. Why, what made this photo so great? What's the story behind it?
The story. Well, I mean, if you remember, that Penn State's down by a touchdown, right? With like under 2 minutes to go at that point, and Michigan and the whole bit, whiteout, and they had the ball. What about midfield? Maybe a little bit on their own end of the 50, and time's running low, and it's kind of like they hadn't beaten a really good opponent in a long time, and it was. The scandal and all that kind of stuff. And man, the Hackenberg unleashes that throw down the field, and Robinson just climbed the ladder and got that ball. But I mean, the catch, it was a huge play. I mean, it wasn't a touchdown,
right?
Which sometimes people forget that, sometimes people forget. They think, oh, that was I was like, nah, man, that got it within the 5, but then Hackenberg scored on the next play on a sneak.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was the next play. But anyway, not just the action, I mean, I love the action, him up in the air and the Michigan guy reaching, but like the reaction in the background was what I loved. Like the people, you can even see Audrey Snyder back there in a maroon sweater,
Yeah.
But
I mean, every single person's eyes are focused this direction.
Yeah, exactly. And, that was their biggest win at that point. Arguably their biggest win in the decade up to that point,
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a huge game and huge win for them. And, it's a funny story about that is that I saw on the next year, I think it was the next year, maybe, because Robinson was in the NFL. He was on the Bears.
Yeah. Is this the one he has tattooed?
Yeah, he has a tattooed all on his side, like his whole side, And I saw him, he came back for a game like a couple years later, and I saw him. I'm like, hey, man, that's my photo you got on your side. He's like, yeah. He goes, I always wanted to get a copy of that, So I was like, all right, man, give me your info. And I got him a photo. I sent him a photo, and he was all jacked up about that. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Immortalized in ink on Allen Robinson's side.
This one. What makes this one good? This is obviously from 409, but why was this a keeper for you?
Oh my God. Is that the
this field goal hits the upright?
Oh, this is the game that, okay. Man, I didn't even forget about that. Well, that's history, man. That's, right?
Yep.
That's, and that, shooting an field goal, like, well, there's another famous field goal. That one was blocked though. That was a very similar angle, but like, yeah, I mean, it's the crucial moment, right? It's the kicker putting it up, and the whole game comes down to this one play and this one moment, and it's just
That's awesome. All right, so you mentioned that one, but this photo came after that game. Why is this such an iconic photo in my head? Like, this is actually the photo I think about from this game the most.
No, wait, that last one. This one's from.
Well, yeah, this is the Ohio State game. You meant,
right. Okay, yeah. I love this photo. I love this photo because it's like the clock runs out. I run out on the field, and you're like, it's bedlam, and I'm like 5'10", and these guys are massive, and you're in the midst of all these trees, and it's like running through the forest of the sequoias, trying to see around like who's doing what and who's celebrating, and I'm just running around, and it's happening so fast, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden I see this student come running over and jump into his arms, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" And I just ran up, and I probably got about 2 frames off, and and the moment was over. And it just reminded me. I don't know if you remember that old photo. This was way back when the war ended.
Okay.
The sailor,
Yes.
kissing the girl in Times Square.
I brought this up specifically because I was going to say that this is the Penn State version of that photo.
Yeah,
So
right.
I am glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and that's what it reminded me of. I was just kind of like when I saw it, I'm like, oh my god, that's like
That's awesome.
it's and it's funny. Like a couple of years later, I was Live for Life, and this just a woman comes up to me, a young woman comes up to me. She's like, "Are you Joe Herman?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And she's like, "Oh, I just want to thank you." She goes, "You took a photo of me and my boyfriend after the Ohio State game," and I'm like thinking, I don't know who you are, I don't know who your
Yeah.
boyfriend is, and it was after the game, and he was a player. It was John me, and I jumped in his arms, and I was like, "Oh my god, yeah, I love that photo." And she's like, "Oh, it's on our wall, and it's like one of my favorite memories of college." And I
That's
was just like,
awesome.
"That is like awesome. That's really cool."
That's awesome. All
Really,
right.
yeah.
Last one. What makes this photo a good photo?
Oh,
This is the agony. This is
Poor Summers. Poor
Was this
Summers.
I think this was the UCF game. I believe this was what this is from. I'm not 100% certain, but I think it was.
You would know better than I, but
You have way too many photos like this of me. Like there's a couple happy ones, but there's at least 10 of me like this.
what year did you graduate?
2016.
Oh, so that was a good year.
That was a good. Well, so 2015 was my last season, but I think if I remember correctly,
Oh, okay.
This is when UCF came and beat them.
Yes. Yeah.
2013, I think it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to at least bring this one on because I do think, even though I'm in this photo and I'm miserable in this photo, I think this is a great photo journalistically as well.
Yeah, you got your drumstick for your. You know what? Nittanyville guys don't do the cowbell anymore. I'm a little disappointed.
It's because they can't sneak them in like they used to.
Is that right?
That's what I've been told. That's all I'll say.
Really?
That's all
Really?
I'll say. That's all I'll say. I mean, there are ways, but that's all I'll say.
Maybe I can work something out with it.
There you go. There you go.
Maybe I can get a cowbell in my camera bag or something.
Nobody's gonna bother. Nobody's gonna
Yeah,
bother.
that's cowbell. Who doesn't want more cowbell?
All right, Joe. Where can people find you, your stuff? This is your moment to plug you.
Yes, you can find my work on PennLive.com. Or you can go on. I'm very active on Twitter or X. I still call it Twitter. That's X. I try to be more active on Instagram during the season. Sometimes I slack on that, but I need to get more active on social media. But my handle on everything is just at Joe Hermitt with 2 T's. Yeah, it's shockingly no one else has taken the handle Joe Hermitt. I guess there aren't any other Joe Hermits out there, but
No, well, I appreciate this. This was awesome. I think this was a great
yeah,
conversation.
that was fun.
Steve, that was I did that interview with me, just me, because you were driving your way back across the country last night. I'm curious though, do you think we collectively as fans of Penn State football, but really media and the like, I think we undervalue the sports photographer in a lot of ways, more so than maybe any other of the TV person, beat writer, mainly because they get the least amount of credit in a lot of ways, even if there is a tagline on their photos.
Oh, I think that's true, and I think the good ones make it look easy. And the Penn State beat has had a lot of good ones, including Joe. So, and I'm really excited about seeing the stuff. Right, like it's a new level for us sharing someone's content too. So when we talk to you, we can be showing your stuff. But yes, I think undervalued extremely, and it's not an easy gig.
No, Joe. The other part of that interview then was I, of course, had to ask Joe about the incident in Northwestern last year where he went through it all, and but yeah, I think like there is an art to taking photos, and I don't think I could go out there, or one of us could go out there tomorrow and take anywhere near the quality of photos that he does. Really anybody else that takes photos for the beat and kind of through Penn State. I think it's very underappreciated, and I always try to make sure that like when we share stuff, on Twitter or wherever, uh, take the extra second and tag the person, or make sure that their name is at least included. It's lazy. If Taylor Swift can do it, so can you.
There you
My
go.
my rant.
You're equal with Taylor Swift.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to pull it up. Okay. Let's, as I don't have this pulled up yet, the James Franklin quote that I want to talk about. Let's take a slight right turn towards kick times this week. Am I right to be annoyed as a fan that Penn State and Illinois still doesn't have a kick time, even if it sort of has a general idea of a kick time, or am I just overreacting?
I think you're overreacting. You
Okay.
know within half an hour now, right? You know it's a night
Okay.
game. I mean, realistically, it doesn't change your day at all. If the only people that have a shot at being annoyed are the people who may or may not have whichever services it ends up on. And I can't. I mean, it's either Peacock or Fox, probably, or Fox Sports One.
Probably
There's a
or
couple.
NBC, I think.
Oh, yes, right. NBC, right? Sorry. That's what I'm thinking. Big Ten Saturday night. And which if Illinois wins Friday night against Nebraska this coming, like I think that may be. Although there's good games that week. Like there's a couple three intriguing late games that week, which is why I think they're dragging their feet to see which one they think will be most important.
It is interesting as I pull up the schedule here to think about the number of games this week that are like, or that week are, I was very conscientious about how I worded my Monday morning tweet of there's a good chance that we get a kick time, because I felt like that there was a probability of the 6-day windows that did happen. And I don't know, I think maybe it's just like I look at the NFL and they, to a degree, are much more predictable than college football. And we've had this conversation plenty of times before. And I get maybe jealous of that. Like college football is the only premier American sport where you do not know the schedule ahead of time, including the times, months, sometimes even a year in advance. Like even with baseball schedule, you can pretty much say, okay, every Tuesday through Friday game is going to be at either 6:35 or 7:35, depending on the team. And then after that, like, day games are usually going to happen on Saturdays and Sundays. It hasn't prevented me from going, but it's prevented me. In fact, and maybe this is why I'm particularly fired up about it. There's a concert in New York City the night before the UCLA game that I would like to go to. Bleachers, as if you've read the newsletter, you know that I'm a big Bleachers fan. And they're playing Madison Square Garden. I would like to go to that concert, but we don't have a kick time for that game. And I would also like to go to the football game. If the game is at noon, I probably can't logistically make that work. But 3:30 or 7:30 opens up that probability for me to make the game, or make the concert, because I want to make the game. That's
Yes,
the best way to say it.
and so 2 points to that game. Like A, you're a lot younger than me. You can drive through the night and make it. And B, it's not. I guess to me the shock of this season would be is if they made UCLA come east and play at noon. Not that there's that much respect for them, not that it matters, but I guess it would surprise me.
I think maybe before the season, because I think I have to look at our guesses. I think one of us did pick this as a noon game, and now I definitely feel different about it, partly because UCLA isn't as good, but two, like, I don't think that game is going to end up on national TV, because I don't think UCLA is as big of a draw as it was or is. And I think if you're like, I think it is disrespectful to make UCLA, or vice versa, like pretend Penn State was playing UCLA the weekend that they're playing USC. Like, I think it would be disrespectful to make a team go across the continent, quite literally, and then play a noon game, which is 9 a.m. or 3. Yeah, it's just.
But then translating that to the 28th weekend, I guess I overthought how good this is. You got Oregon at UCLA, nobody cares. You've got Wisconsin at USC. Wisconsin doesn't have a quarterback.
Right.
You've got Minnesota at Michigan, and you've got Illinois at Penn State. It feels like that's at this point a 7:30 Big Ten Saturday night. Like if you're choosing now, even if Illinois spits the bit and loses it at Nebraska, that's still a 3-1 Illinois team from the big city of Chicago still feels more appealing than the other ones. Although Michigan's a better draw. Like Michigan is a better TV draw.
But they've already been on. Michigan has their whole weird. They're very weird about their night games there. 1 and 2, they've already been on a night game out there already. So as we sit here and like talk this through, yeah, you're helping me see the light that this 7:30. So, but I do agree that like maybe I shouldn't be that annoyed by the fact that I have a half-hour window now as opposed to before when. Because 3:30 versus 7:30 is substantially different because they're like 3:30 we could drive theoretically back to Frederick after a 3:30 game. Are we going to? Probably not. But for people that don't have the luxury of having their mom live in Altoona, Pennsylvania, like I do, like you know what I'm saying? Like if you live in York, like you kind of might need a hotel if you've got a 7:30 game as opposed to the 3:30 game. You really don't.
Right. No, I think they got you within half an hour, 12 days out. I think that's as good as you're going to get in the college football money world, just because they're just maybe in a year or two they'll start doing that, but I just don't think they're inclined to set stuff ahead of time because they don't have to.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. Well, we'll have to look at Steve's spreadsheet, which lives on the blog. That's a shameless plug for that, but this might be one of the latest homecoming games ever because they traditionally are at noon. I can think of that Michigan game in 2013. Was it like 6 o'clock game or 5 o'clock game? It was a weird start time. Maybe Minnesota was.
There was a run there for a while where they did them at noon. Like last year it was at 3:30. Illinois in 2021 was at noon. What was this? This was 7:30 Minnesota last year, 2 years ago, 2022.
Okay, that's what I thought.
7:30.
That's what I thought.
But there was a run of like 4 or 5 years there when like they tried to do it at noon and then they were doing stuff in the indoor track afterwards with like the Alumni Association. It felt like they had a little bit of control over the noon game there in that window. But yeah, 7:30, probably not any later than the 7:30, but you did that a couple years ago against Minnesota.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't really have any deep thoughts about Penn State playing Kent State this weekend. My main thought would probably be is the score record going to fall this weekend? I don't think it is. Just because I don't think James Franklin would run the score up that way, although he did famously take a timeout to try to ice and kicker against Georgia State. But the main interesting thing that came out of James Franklin's press conference this week that I do want to spend some time talking about this week on the podcast, because I think this flows nicely with the game situation or the kick time situation, is this question. I think Neil Rudell asked it. And effectively, I'm just going to read the question. I'm wondering, you had mentioned earlier this season how the playoffs are going to lengthen the season now, and you're concerned about building that depth and whatnot. I'm just wondering, with the changes, do you still advocate, I know you guys have a financial consideration, a 12-game regular season? And basically the crux of the answer from James Franklin lies in the kind of the third paragraph. I don't think that's the right thing to do, but that's not changing for all the reasons that you could imagine. It's just like the conferences that play 9 or 8 games. I don't think that was advantageous either for the Big Ten, but I would make the other argument, once you go to 9, you're not going back to 8. You're hoping conferences will go to 9. I actually even see it possibly going to a 10 conference games. I think this answer is very interesting for a lot of reasons. Number one, as a proponent of getting rid of the Power 5 rule, my main takeaway is a Power 5 non-conference rule is I would actually be fine if teams went back to 11 games a season. And then you're going to schedule a MAC team and then an FCS team. To me, like, I think with the playoff and considering where Penn State is and probably should end up every year in terms of the way that picture plays out, I'm fine with that. But I could understand Indiana, Ball State, any of those programs being upset about that, just because that's a significant portion of money being cut off the table. So I don't think they're going to cut that. But I am interested and fascinated to see kind of has this whole like collective bargaining thing. Steve and I were talking about the Tennessee thing where they're throwing in a fee on tickets, basically that goes directly to the athletes, which Steve is happy about because they're calling it what it is, a performance fee. I'm curious. I think there's something there. Like, I don't think James Franklin would have said this without there being some smoke in the water about maybe moving to 10. 10 conference games. I think, but I don't think we're ever going backwards. I think we're always going to be at 12.
I think you're much closer to 10 conference games than you are to 11 overall. And I think that goes to our discussion we just had about the 28th and the quality of games that are there. If you have one more conference game for every team, all of a sudden there's a lot more attractive games for your TV partners. And those are the ones who are paying the money. I mean, it's why the NFL went to more games each year, because the partners want more games as opposed to games that don't matter. And it is exactly the same thing as getting the exhibition games off the schedule and playing more regular season games. So, and what would be lost in that instance for Penn State fans going forward is nothing. I mean,
right.
UMass and whoever we're playing from the MAC and whatever else. I mean, the conference is much tougher, but there's not a good non-con on it. So you might as well just play the conference games. And I guess what will help them get there, if they do get there, is if the coaches and the university presidents believe that losses are being valued, like this year and next. Like, and if the first couple, if teams with one or two losses who have quality losses still get in, then I think there'd be more motion toward 10 conference.
I was talking to somebody about that exact topic of what is gonna happen. Like, I think we've overvalued. Okay, I know why we were talking about this. So we were talking about the in 2028, Penn State has their non-conference schedule booked. That includes a game with UMass, and I think we've kind of actually screwed the market collectively up, if you will, because we have overvalued. Before we were overvaluing non-conference games, the bigger non-conference opponents. Now they're virtually useless. But I am interested to see, like, if it comes down to, let's say, a 10-2 teams, and your losses are one conference opponent and one non-conference, and then for somebody that's got two conference losses, like, I think there's legitimate argument that you should get in if you have the one non-conference loss, because I think you set yourself up to be in a more difficult situation. Now, obviously, it depends on who it is, but if it's net neutral, if it's the number 15 team versus the number 16 team, if is what you're effectively comparing there, I think that's fair. I wonder, and we've talked about this idea too, and I really like this idea. I don't love the blue-white game. Like, I understand why the blue-white game happens, and I love the spring practice game for all of the it's a very nice refresher of getting the collegiate spirit going, but not necessarily the collegiate football spirit going. I wonder, do you switch that game into, that's where you play your FCS opponent, and then they're still going to get the money from that, and then you go to a 10 conference schedule with two non-conference games. That way everybody still gets their bread, so to speak. Like, you're now playing like kind of 13. That's fine. I'm willing to spend $10 for the blue-white game. It would be annoying because I like to just use the bathrooms in the stadium while I'm tailgating, but that's about it.
I think that gets to, a point of the 10 games in another variable, right? With 10 games, you get 5 and 5, right? So you you know you're getting an extra home game, but you're also losing a home. You're sort of losing a home game, right? Like Penn State's
Mm.
always going to you're losing that flexibility to have an extra home game that you're just going to pay somebody for. Like the years that Penn State has 4 conference home games, it has 3 non-cons that get
Yeah,
you
I
to
didn't think about
7.
that.
I mean, I guess you're going to still get to 7 with 2, but you have those 3 extras, those games you pay just to lay out a little bit of money to make a bunch more money on the money that people are coming in. I think for teams and conferences, it matters less because you can make it 5 and 5 and make it equal out. Because we were at Notre Dame this past weekend, I was looking at future schedules. They have 7 home games next season and 4 the following.
Well, but they also have all those weird gimme games or not gimme games. Sorry, the like neutral site ish games, the Shamrock series and things like that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying they only have 4 games in South Bend next year. Right? That's it. Or 2 years from now. Next year they have
Okay.
7. The year after they have 4. That's an uncertainty that Penn State doesn't want. Penn State doesn't want to have a variable
Right.
of 3 less games from one season to another. And that's what 9 kind of gives it. And I think 10 would too, 5 and 5. They just make sure those other 2, they would never go anywhere with 10.
No, it's
Right.
gonna be
There would always be 2 softies, and they would never ever go on the road anywhere again. Which again, conference is tougher. You don't have to, but I think those are all tentacles and pieces of it.
I guess I wonder in terms of there's got to be enough supply and demand out there for a school like Rutgers, for example, to be able to still have those 7 home games. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
If you're 4 conference games and you still want to get to 7 at home and you're in the Big Ten on that low when you've got 9, you only got 4 that season, everybody's fine in those 3 games easily.
Yeah. Okay. I had another thought there, but I don't think it's not anything earth shattering.
So
okay.
let me
Go ahead.
just quick, just in terms of Notre Dame, like we haven't talked about this, but in terms of value of wins and losses, if they're 11-1 and somebody's 11-1 in conference with a, I mean, that's got to be like the worst loss in the country for a good team this year. I mean, I don't care what Northern Illinois ends up being, you lose at home to them.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's just a horrible loss, right?
Yeah. We've talked about this loss now 2 weeks in a row. We've become a Notre Dame podcast. No, you're good. I think like it is baffling to me that Notre Dame still doesn't want to join a conference, like it at least football wise, because they can never be higher than the 5 seed, and you've just made it now all the world harder for you to you only have 7 spots to get into the playoffs effectively, even if you're just as good as like the years that they were a 1 through 4 ranked team. I think I don't I understand the TV deal, but I at some point don't understand removing yourself from the equation. And I think that's even why the Pac-12 thing is rehappening again. Like I think that's why we're bringing that back, because they're like, we can at least have a better shot. Like any Boise State can have a much better shot as playing a Pac-12 school, even if the conference is effectively the same moving forward.
Right. And I think to James Franklin's point about 10 games, coaches will want to see those types of losses punished or those types of wins valued, and it'll help them go along with 10 games if they get to that point, sometime in the future.
Well, we're all just headed towards giant super conference anyways. It's just going to be East versus West or something like that. Okay, young guy.
Who is the broadcaster of your youth? Like the first person you knew of or saw or thought of? Oh, sports. Oh, I associate them with sports on TV.
The obvious answer, sports on TV. Okay, because I think Bill Hillgrove and Steve Jones, we've already talked about that ad nauseum. I think those two. The weird one for me is Brett Musburger.
Oh yeah, should be.
Just because Keith Jackson was kind of on his way out. Like I can still hear Keith Jackson calling the Rose Bowl, particularly that 2005 Rose Bowl. Like I distinctly remember it being Keith Jackson that called that game. But a big football game, Brent Musburger. I also think Joe Buck deserves to be on at least my generation's version of that list. I was talking about that with somebody this week. Like, he's kind of sort of like our version of Jack, like our version of his dad, I think, from people my age. So
I think now that you mentioned Steve Jones, I think Fran Fisher for me, just knowing a little bit about, that's how I consumed Penn State football, and Penn State football was probably the thing. And probably I thought Howard Cosell initially, but the more I thought about it, I think Kurt Gowdy. I think he was the guy
what
who
was
did
he? I don't.
many sports, baseball,
Okay.
football, did a little bit of everything. Did the American Sportsman, which was an anthology show about outdoor stuff on ABC right after Wide World of Sports. So I think he was as ubiquitous as anybody else in that time. And when I think about some of the first voices, it might be him, maybe Cosell, in terms of national people. Not that there weren't a lot of people, Chris Schenkel on bowling on Saturday afternoons and stuff like that, but
It's
Gowdy
weird.
seemed to do a little bit of everything.
It's weird that you say that, because I actually think like about the cast of crew of Sports Center anchors from 1999 to like 2005, right? Like that group, that is almost, I think people look at the SNL the same way. Like you kind of always have this bunch of, like, your mind SNL is always this specific era, right? That is almost as like kind of the end of the Dan Patrick era. But then, Stuart Scott Van Pelt, John Anderson, that kind of era of Sports Center also comes to mind.
Yeah, no, I think that Sports Center group, for a lot of people, right, in terms of sports fans, that's how they consumed their highlights. That was appointment viewing, and those people, the writing and stuff that they did. Yeah.
Not to make anybody anxious that does work at the Worldwide Leader that listens to this podcast, which I think there's got to be at least one. I know of at least one. And we've had guests on. But is Sports Center dead? Like, when's the last time you watched Sports Center? Like, when's the last time you made it on purpose?
Oh, on purpose. I watched Sunday morning briefly.
That recently?
Just because there was nothing, like I just had, like Saturday, we hadn't seen, there wasn't a Penn State game. We watched a lot of football Saturday though. Game day, I catch the last half hour on Saturdays pretty regularly before game day. Like just that little transition to it.
I don't regularly watch Sports Center anymore. I don't.
But and it's funny, we had a guy from Sports, Mr. Walsh, get his name, and all the ESPN people that are listening, right, are going to say, oh my God, he's a legend. We had him here at university 10 or 12 years ago, and he was talking about it. And I'm like, you guys kind of killed Sports Center. Like, with all the other stuff, like it's not appointment viewing anymore. And it wasn't then. People's consumption habits. But yeah, it's not so much appointment viewing it. And they tried so many things through the years to fix it that maybe SVP is appointment viewing for a lot of people.
Yeah, that would be SVP. Probably is not necessarily appointment viewing, but I do, if it's on. I didn't stay up till the end of the game last night, but like if it's on after a big game in ESPN, like I will stick around and watch SVP for a little bit just because I enjoy him.
Right. Yeah, no, I think he's probably the last of the last of the shows that people just know. And again, if we watched it more, we'd know who the hosts are, because I think they standardized it more than what they tried to do with a couple of different iterations of it in the past decade or so.
Yeah. All right. Anything else we missed there?
No.
Okay.
Looking forward to the big game on Saturday.
Yeah, me too. General game plan for this week as usual. I guess it'll be Wednesday when you listen to this, so there'll be depth charts on the website by then. Thursday, game preview, normal stuff after the game. Do you think Penn State breaks the points record? Yes or no?
No.
I don't think so either. I'm interested to see how good
cover the spread
look. It's 51. It's the highest spread ever. You think they're going to cover the spread?
Tennessee scored 71, right? Like, do you have to keep up with the Joneses?
That's what I was just going to ask. Will you be? How many people will be disgruntled if Penn State does not win?
What if it's 49-3, right, or something like that? Who knows? Like, I feel bad for God bless them for the money they're making off of this at Kent State, or maybe they're not making a boatload of money. But man, what a tough stretch of the season. You at least thought you were going to beat St. Francis, and that didn't happen. So
Johnny said it was from the Penn Live. Johnny McGonigal had, I think, 1.6 million. So that's,
yeah.
I mean, but hey, that funds a significant portion of their stuff
And,
there.
and
So
it's the economy. Stuff's going up. You can't buy an opponent for just $1 million anymore.
Welcome to our economics podcast as well.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's good. Okay. I think we hit everything, covered everything. So yeah, that's the week. The website's called stuffsummersays.com. On the website, there's a section called With
Steve.
We've got emails. Mine's Darian at stuffsummersays.com. Steve's is
Steve at stuffsummersays.com.
I almost forgot my email address. And lastly, our Twitter handles are at stuffsummersays and Steve's is
That's Steve Samsel.
See ya. Bye.